How did Alexandra Eala win that? The crowd are on their feet. Eala barely has the energy to get to the net to congratulate her opponent on a classic.
So we've just seen Chen and Eala dominate the number 2 seeds and half of the winning team in the Australian Open. Zhang, who was actually in the team with Buksha, did win the Australian Open a couple of weeks ago. So massive win for them and massive win for South.
When Novak Djokovic mentioned Alex Eala, it made everyone in the stop and listen tennis world. The greatest player of all time never gives out praise lightly. So it wasn't simply kind words when he referred to her as a superstar at a press conference. That endorsement had the power to completely alter the course of her career. Let's examine Djokovic's actual remarks and why they are far more significant than you may have imagined. Before we discuss Djokovic's remarks, please leave a comment letting me know if you were aware of Alex Eala before everything went so wrong or if the chaos has only recently led you to learn about her. Okay, so this is what took place. During a standard news conference at the Australian Open, Novak Djokovic was asked about the tournament's development during the more than 2 decades that he has been visiting Melbourne. It's a rather common query. They were curious about his thoughts on the large crowds, corporate sponsorships, and grievances that the event had become overly commercialized and congested.
I saw the other day with Alex Eala, that's been a talk, and which is understandable. There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever, tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big interest. So things like that happen. I mean, it's you could argue that it was, maybe a poor schedule, and maybe they could schedule him on a bigger court. Yes, but again, she's so young and she's just coming through. So. And obviously the first couple of rounds, the schedule is so packed, the big courts with big names, it's difficult. It's not easy to manage that. But again, it's a good problem to have, to be honest. Let's just imagine if there's a lack of people coming, or that stands are empty. That's a bigger problem.
The majority of players would respond in a generic way, saying something like, "It's great to see tennis growing." However, Djokovic chose a very different course for it. He asserted that every tournament organizer aspires to sell out tickets and break attendance records, and that griping about crowded venues is a luxury issue. He then added this line: "Having too many supporters is one of the worst nightmares an event may encounter." That is Djokovic at his best. The man has been around long enough to recall the days when a local football club lent space to the Australian Open so that players would have a place to warm up. He explicitly referenced using an Australian rules team's gym across the street. He initially mispronounced the name, saying Essendon, then changed it to Collingwood and apologized to the supporters, indicating that the rivalry is reportedly quite serious in Australia. He was arguing that the Australian Open has evolved from a competition that was barely surviving on borrowed facilities to a huge international gathering complete with indoor arenas, recuperation centers, and 5-star amenities. That change does not represent a betrayal of tennis's past. It is evidence that the sport is more popular and successful than it has ever been. However, things became more fascinating when Djokovic switched to Alex Eala. He mentioned how thousands of people showed up to try to get into her match, which was set to take place on a small outer court. He claimed that, with good reason, that has been the locker room discussion. The limits of security measures were being stretched. The logistics fell apart entirely. There was mayhem. Here's the important section now. Djokovic didn't portray this as a catastrophe or a sign that the event administrators had failed. He presented it as proof of a more significant development in tennis. He said that they most likely ought to have foreseen the reaction and placed her on a higher court. The true tale, however, is why so many people initially showed up. An complete country is represented by Alex Eala. With a population of over 110 million, the Philippines has never seen a tennis player get such widespread attention. Djokovic's description of her as a superstar is not a casual remark. That person is the best tennis player ever. Realizing that Alex Eala is more than just another young, talented athlete. She is now a phenomenon in the culture. The burden she bears extends beyond her performance and ranking. On the largest platforms in the world, she is representing an entire nation that views her as their ambassador. Let's be honest, This is where the sarcasm comes in. On this one, the Australian Open organizers completely failed. They put a player with the support of 110 million people on a court that could accommodate only a few hundred spectators. What did they anticipate happening? That instead of attempting to see her play live, everyone would kindly watch on their phones. The fact that this became such a significant problem demonstrates how out-of-step tournament organizers can be with the shifting tennis spectator demographics. They continue to function on the premise that the only athletes who attract sizable audiences are the well-known Western celebrities, but Alexa is evidence that the sport is expanding internationally more quickly than the infrastructure can keep up. When Djokovic discussed striking a balance between crowd control and experience preservation, he did a great job of illustrating this idea. He witnessed what transpired with EA and knew it was a sign of things to come. New areas, ferocious fan bases, and complete mayhem when those fan bases appear. The type of cultural phenomenon that I represent is not taken into consideration by the outdated scheduling and judicial assignment models. Eala's ascent to this degree of recognition was virtually immediate, which is crazy. Tennis typically like to slow cook its stars. You work hard on the tour for years, progressively rising in the rankings and gaining fans. With Yaya, however, it's been as simple as turning a switch. She is a talented young player 1 minute, and then the whole country is following her every step and flocking to see her play. The fact that the sports infrastructure wasn't designed for this kind of overnight worldwide celebrity makes for a really intriguing dynamic. Media commitments, TV spots, and court reservations are all still centered on the conventional route to fame. Confusion and friction result when someone crosses the line for reasons of national and cultural significance as opposed to ranking points. That's why Djokovic's remarks are so significant. He has experienced this firsthand. He understands what it's like to bear the aspirations of a whole nation. Although the population of Serbia is smaller than that of the Philippines, the expectations and pressures are comparable. He is speaking from experience when he claims that being famous is like being imprisoned in a golden cage. If you're not ready for it, the same surge of adulation that uplifts you might also sink you. That pressure is tremendous for a teenager like Eala, who is still learning how to compete professionally. Winning matches and raising her rating aren't her only goals. Millions of people look to her achievement as a sign of their own success, and she is controlling their expectations. That is an entirely different mental strain than what the majority of young athletes experience. There was more to the mob situation at her match than just passionate fans. They were ardent believers who battled their way across seas and through throngs of people who were eager to meet their idol. The tennis wasn't the main reason they were there. They were present in support of her. This turns an ordinary early round match into a spectacle that surpasses everything taking place on the main courts. Djokovic acknowledged this and chose to appreciate the turmoil rather than criticize it. He declared, "When the sport outgrows its facilities, these frenzy events are unavoidable." The growth of players like Eala demonstrates how complicated the problem has grown, despite the fact that the first week of a Grand Slam is always chaotic with tight timetables and competing storylines. These days, fan interaction goes beyond rankings and awards. It has to do with national pride and cultural weight. There are two things that happen when the greatest player in history openly supports a rookie talent like this. It first validates all of the hysteria surrounding her. Djokovic calling you a superstar is confirmation from someone who understands exactly what it takes to perform at the highest level, even though people may write off fan enthusiasm as irrational nationalism or whatever. Second, it shields her from some of the scrutiny and criticism that accompany such abrupt celebrity. People will constantly argue that she hasn't achieved enough to warrant the fanfare and that the attention is unwarranted or unjustified. However, Djokovic's support negates that. In essence, he is stating that the tennis community needs to adapt to this new reality since the hoopla is genuine and won't go away. It's actually rather amazing to see the contrast between the Australian Open today and when Djokovic first began playing there. He discussed sharing ice baths with football players and utilizing gyms that were borrowed. The competition now features cutting-edge equipment. Tennis underwent that change as a result of its self-investment and expansion of its global reach. However, that expansion also brings with it new difficulties, such as how to respond when a player's cultural significance transcends their ranking or seats. Tournament organizers should ink Djokovic's more general point that packed stadiums are preferable to empty ones on their foreheads. Apathy is the worst thing that can happen to a sport. You will fail if people are not interested enough to attend. It's precisely the kind of issue you want when thousands of people are vying for a spot on a side court to watch a young Filipino player. It indicates that tennis is expanding into new markets and attracting the interest of individuals who had previously shown no interest in the game. That's how you create sustainability and long-term growth. Yes, it causes short-term logistical issues, but they are worthwhile challenges to address. You learn how to construct larger venues, enhance crowd control, and modify the schedule. Lack of interest is something you cannot change. The big question is whether the tennis facility is truly equipped to deal with this new era. For many years, athletes from a comparatively small number of nations have dominated the sport. These days, rising celebrities from nations like the Philippines have enormous following bases that defy the conventional paradigm. Will tournaments change the way they think, or will they continue to put these players on outside courts and then look shocked when mayhem breaks out? Eala's predicament serves as an example of how tennis responds to globalization. It will be a major victory for the sport if it can successfully include these new markets and fan groups without offending traditional consumers. However, the establishment may regret this lost chance if they view these athletes as innovations or disruptions rather than as the sport's future. Djokovic obviously sees Eala as a future player, not just a passing fad. He didn't say anything condescending or contemptuous. Even though she was in her early career, he treated her like a peer. Coming from someone who has more Grand Slam victories than anyone else and has earned the right to gatekeep if he so chooses, it is noteworthy. His decision to elevate her instead demonstrates his awareness of the direction the sport is heading. Tennis cannot continue to exist with the same old American and European stars. To attract new fans and maintain the sport's relevance on a worldwide scale, it requires new faces from a variety of backgrounds. Eala is the ideal fit for that description. Therefore, her success or failure affects more than just her professional career. It will be interesting to see what occurs next. Will Eala be able to cope with the strain and grow into the player that everyone wants her to be? Will competitions take a cue from the Australian Open chaos and modify their scheduling and promotion strategies for players with significant cultural fan bases? Is it possible for the tennis establishment to accept this new wave of international stars? Or will they continue to use antiquated models that don't account for the shifting demographics of the sport? As Eala handles everything, Djokovic's endorsement lends her legitimacy and security. Criticism will come because it always happens with young, highly anticipated athletes. She can mention that Novak referred to her as a superstar and acknowledged her values. That serves as armor against the skeptics and haters who wish to discredit anyone who receives attention they believe is unfair. Although intriguing, the larger discussion about the Australian Open being overly corporate and commercial is somewhat irrelevant. This progression has occurred at every significant athletic event. The prize pools and facilities that draw elite players to the sport are funded by money and sponsorships. Without world-class investment, world-class tennis is impossible. Additionally, there are conditions associated with that investment. More important is whether the sport pursues growth while retaining its essence and competitive integrity. Compared to other sports, tennis has done a respectable job doing that thus far. The top players typically prevail, the competition is genuine, and the in-court product is nevertheless appealing despite its low marketing value. The commercial content is just background noise as long as that keeps happening. There you have it, then. Novak Djokovic did more than merely give Alex Eala a compliment. He essentially hailed her as tennis's future star and criticized the establishment for not being prepared. It wasn't a problem that her match was chaotic. It was a segment that demonstrated how the sport is expanding in unexpected ways. Hit the like button and subscribe if you believe that tennis is going to become much more fascinating when players like Eala make their debut. Please share your opinions in the comments section regarding her ability to live up to the hype.